Can getting fired from the company you started ever be a good thing? For most, it's devastating. But for Steve Jobs, it was the turning point that led him to change the world. This isn't just a story about Apple. It's a story about resilience, reinvention, and radical vision. In this video, we break down the real journey, how Jobs built Apple, got pushed out, and came back with a vengeance that transformed technology forever. This isn't just history. It's a blueprint for anyone who's been counted out but refuses to stay down. Stick around. This one might just flip your definition of failure. The dropout who thought different. Steve Jobs wasn't built for the system. He dropped out of college, slept on friends' floors, and returned Coke bottles for food money. But he was obsessed with design, intuition, and making technology human. He took a calligraphy class at Reed College that would later shape Apple's typography. That class didn't earn him a degree, but it planted a seed. Jobs believed in connecting the dots later, not playing it safe now. While others climbed corporate ladders, he built his own. He wasn't just a rebel. He was a visionary with no plan B. And that focus, even in his early 20s, set him on a collision course with history. Apple, born in a garage, built on belief. In 1976, Jobs and Steve Wozniak founded Apple in a garage. They had no real business plan, just ambition and circuit boards. Jobs wasn't the engineer. He was the storyteller, the marketer, the guy who could sell a computer before it was built. Their first product, the Apple I, sold surprisingly well. The Apple I exploded. By age 25, Jobs was worth over $100 million. But success didn't soften him. He remained intense, demanding, and relentless. Apple became a cultural force, not just a tech company. But that same intensity that helped build Apple would also alienate his team and eventually lead to his downfall. The Macintosh. Brilliant, flawed, and personal. Jobs poured his soul into the Macintosh. Sleek, graphical, and user-friendly, it was a bold step away from clunky command lines. It was also deeply personal. He fought tooth and nail for its design, famously rejecting fan vents because they were ugly. But the Mac was expensive and underpowered. Critics called it beautiful but impractical. Sales didn't meet expectations. Internally, Jobs clashed with executives and alienated colleagues. His obsession with perfection became a liability. The Macintosh wasn't a failure, but it wasn't the revolution Jobs had envisioned either. And in a company growing rapidly, that kind of volatility couldn't be ignored for long. Power struggles and the boardroom coup. Jobs was brilliant, but he was also impulsive, confrontational, and often difficult to manage. After hiring Pepsi executive John Sculley to be Apple's CEO, Jobs found himself in a power struggle. Sculley brought corporate structure. Jobs brought chaos. Eventually, the board sided with Sculley. In 1985, at just 30 years old, Steve Jobs was fired from the very company he created. It wasn't just a business decision. It was personal. He was humiliated, lost, exiled. For most people, that would be the end. But for Jobs, it was the beginning of something far more powerful than even he could see. The wilderness years, alone but not done. After Apple, Jobs could have disappeared. Instead, he doubled down. He founded Next, a computer company that aimed to build the future of enterprise tech. It wasn't a commercial success, but the software would later become the foundation of macOS. At the same time, he bought a tiny animation studio from George Lucas. That company? Pixar. Jobs wasn't just surviving. He was reinventing himself. These years were filled with failure, reinvestment, and long-term plays. While the world moved on, Jobs was quietly building the pieces that would later fuel his greatest comeback. The time in the shadows wasn't a step back, it was a launch pad. Pixar, the accidental empire. Jobs didn't buy Pixar to make animated movies. He thought it could sell software. But when Toy Story was released in 1995, everything changed. Pixar wasn't just a success, it revolutionized animation. Suddenly, Jobs wasn't just a tech guy, he was a Hollywood powerhouse. Pixar went public, made billions, and eventually merged with Disney. The emotional depth of those films reflected something deeper in Jobs, his own transformation. Pixar taught him patience, storytelling, and the power of collaboration. It softened his edges. This side quest turned into a full-blown empire and reminded the world that Jobs wasn't done making magic. He was just getting started. Apple's fall and call for a savior. In Jobs' absence, Apple lost its soul. The company drifted, clunky products, confusing branding, and a lack of innovation. By the mid-1990s, Apple was near bankruptcy. Then, in a surprising move, Apple bought Next in 1997 for its software. That deal brought Jobs back home. At first, he was an advisor, but within months, he was CEO again. The prodigal founder had returned, not just to fix the company, but to reimagine it. This wasn't about revenge. It was about redemption. Apple needed vision. Jobs needed a second chance. And together, they began rewriting the future of technology, starting from the ashes. The iMac, a statement in color. Jobs' first big move after returning? The iMac. It wasn't just a product, it was a statement. Bold, colorful, and beautifully designed, it looked like nothing else on the market. It was plug-and-play simplicity in a world of tech confusion. The iMac sold millions and re-established Apple as a design-driven innovator. But more importantly, it signaled that Jobs was back and better than before. He had learned restraint, refined his taste, and surrounded himself with the right talent. This wasn't the same hot-headed kid from the 80s. It was a visionary with clarity. And now, he was building something even bigger. The iPod, reinventing the beat. Then came the iPod, with 5 simple words, 1,000 songs in your pocket. Jobs redefined music. The iPod wasn't the first MP3 player, but it was the first that people loved. Sleek design, intuitive interface, seamless iTunes integration. It transformed how people consumed music and positioned Apple at the center of pop culture. Jobs understood that people didn't just want features. They wanted feeling. The iPod was Apple's gateway into people's lives. It proved that Jobs could not only launch products, he could launch movements. And he was just warming up. What came next would change the world as we know it. The iPhone, a revolution in your pocket. In 2007, Jobs unveiled the iPhone, and nothing was ever the same. It wasn't just a phone. It was a camera, a music player, an internet communicator, all in one. The iPhone redefined what technology could do and how it could feel. It launched the smartphone era, disrupted entire industries, and made Apple the most valuable company on earth. Jobs' obsession with elegance, simplicity, and function reached its peak. He didn't just design a product, he engineered a cultural shift. The iPhone made technology feel personal, and it put Apple in billions of pockets. What started as failure had evolved into a global legacy. Legacy through loss. The final years. Jobs was diagnosed with cancer in 2003, but kept working. He launched the iPhone, the iPad, and oversaw Apple's exponential growth, all while battling for his life. In 2011, he stepped down as CEO. Months later, he passed away, but by then, he had already secured his place in history. His products redefined communication, creativity, and connection. His leadership style, though polarizing, built a company that continues to innovate long after his death. Jobs didn't just build gadgets. He built a mindset that we can push the limits of what's possible if we stay curious, stay bold, and never settle. If this video moved you, inspired you, or made you rethink failure, hit that like button, drop a comment, and share it with someone who needs to hear it. And don't forget to subscribe to Spark Your Soul, where we bring you stories that ignite ambition and push you to think bigger. Your next chapter might just be your greatest. Keep building.